All right, so we are in part one where we're going to read and answer some questions. So this is about Native Americans prior to 1492. It should take us anywhere between 8 and 12 minutes, like for all of it, but if you need more time, remember that you can just pause the recording. So read this excerpt below and then answer the questions off here to the right. It begins. The first Americans are believed to have arrived in North America over 10,000 years ago. They crossed the land bridge that existed between Asia and North America in the area now referred to as the Bering Strait. The Native Americans developed individual groups or nations. It is estimated that when the first Europeans arrived in 1492, there were 15 to 20 million people living on the land. There were over 200 North American tribes speaking over 200 different languages. The United States eventually used the uniqueness of the Navajo language to its advantage in World War II. Rather than encrypting radio messages, it proved simpler to use Navajos to speak to each other in their everyday language to convey high-security messages. It worked. Lifestyles varied greatly. Most tribes were domestic, but the Lakota followed the buffaloes as nomads. Most engaged in war, but the Apache were particularly feared, while the Hopis were pacifists. Most societies were ruled by men, but the Iroquois women chose the leaders. Native Americans lived in wigwams, hogans, igloos, teepees, and longhouses. Some relied chiefly on hunting and fishing, while others domesticated crops. The Algonquin chiefs tried to achieve consensus when the Natchez Sun was an absolute monarch. The totem pole was not a universal Indian symbol. It was used by tribes such as the Chinook in the Pacific Northwest to ward off evil spirits and represent family histories. Now we're going to answer these questions. Number 1, why might using the term Native Americans in our study be problematic? Why would that be a problem to have happen? Why would it be using Native Americans? Question number 2. What is the significance about the date 1492? So we see it appears, it has appeared multiple times already in the 3 days that we've had class. What's significant about 1492? And why do we talk about that as the first Europeans arriving? Question number 3. How many people were estimated to have lived in this area prior to 1492? Remember, this is based on this reading. I know in the video we watched yesterday? Oh no. I'm a little... The video we will watch tomorrow. Anyway, there will be a video that we'll watch that we'll talk about, there may or may not have been some inflated or conflated amounts. Now we're going to move on to section 2. We're going to read and respond in native groups. So we're looking, again, this should not take long. So 6 minutes-ish of reading, and then answering some questions. The Native Americans throughout North America had a number of similarities. Each group or nation spoke the same language, and almost all were organized around an extended clan or family. They usually descended from one individual. Each group has a series of leaders. In some cases, the leaders inherited their roles. In others, they were elected. Native Americans believed in the power of the spirits. The spirits were found in nature. Their religious leaders were called shaman. Native Americans believed that people should live in harmony with nature. They did not believe that people should own land, rather the land belonged to everyone. There are a number of distinct groups of Native Americans. On the Northwest coast, the Native Americans of the Northwest had no need to farm. The land was full of animals. The sea was full of fish. Most of the villages were located near the ocean. Wood was plentiful, and the natives in the area used the woods to build large homes. One of the unique innovations of the Indians of the Northwest was a large canoe that could hold 50 people. They were carved out of giant redwoods. California. California natives were blessed with mild weather. Over 100 Native American groups lived there. Those that lived by the sea were able to live off fishing and native plant life. Those that lived inland, like the Pomo, hunted small game. They also gathered acorns and pound them into mush to eat. The Plateau. The Plateau Native Americans lived in the areas between the Cascade Mountains and the Rocky Mountains. That area has many large rivers and was the main source of food and travel. The area was cold in the winter, and to protect them, the natives built homes that were partially underground. Approximately 20 groups lived in the area. The Great Basin. The Great Basins is located in what includes all of Nevada and Utah, most of western Colorado. It was home of the Shoshone, the Paiute, and the Ute. It was a land that was hot and dry. Those that lived there were called diggers, since they were forced to dig for most of their food. The natives of the Southwest were divided into two groups. Some were hunter-gatherers, and some were farmers. The Pueblos were the best known of the natives in the area. They were skilled farmers and grew many crops. The Pueblos used irrigation channels to bring water for their farming. The Apache and Navajo entered the Southwest around 1500 and were hunter-gatherers. The Plains. The plains stretched from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. The areas had large herds of buffalo and antelope, which provided abundant food. The Native Americans of the plains included the Sioux, Pawnee, Crow Cheyenne, and Comanche. The Northeast. The Native Americans of the Northeast lived in a rich area of rivers and forests. Some groups were constantly on the move, while others built permanent homes. The two main cultures of the Northeast were the Iroquois and the Algonquin. For many years, the Native Americans of the Northeast were at war with each other. The Southeast. The Southeast was the most populated of all regions of North America. It was home to the Cherokee, Creek Choctaw, Seminole, and Natchez. Many of the natives of the Southeast hunted buffalo, deer, and other animals. The majority of the Native Americans of the Southeast were farmers. Question number 1 is asking you to think about what are some similarities you notice between the groups of people that would have separated them from European explorers. So you're both basically thinking about how are the native groups similar that would have separated them from the Europeans. So you're basically comparing all of the native groups to the Europeans, how they were different, if that makes sense. And then question number 2, what elements of these lifestyles do you think would have made Europeans see natives as primitive? And were they primitive in your opinion? Why or why not? Once you're done with that, you can click on the next video where it says Map Analysis.